Celebrity fashion photographer Kevin Michael Schmitz here. Now, I photograph campaigns for Burberry, for Giorgio Armani, and I shoot six-figure campaigns all over the world. But you know what? I want to focus on rejection. It is one of the most difficult situations that we can face as a photographer. And you know what? Even though I've had an unbelievable successful career, I get rejected all the time. I get rejected every day. And you know what? Most top photographers get rejected constantly. In fact, they all do. So you're not alone. Believe it or not, rejection is ubiquitous throughout this industry. We're creatives, we're artists, and there's just a fact of life that we will get rejected. And you know what? I personally love rejection. You might not. I know a lot of photographers, they get freaked out by it and, it might hurt their feelings or whatever. For me, I love it. I absolutely cannot get enough of it because the more rejected that I get, it means that the more I'm putting myself out there, the more actions I'm taking, the more momentum I'm taking, the more times I have reached out equals the more times I'll get rejected. So if I'm not being rejected, it means that there's something wrong. It means that I'm being lazy and I'm not putting myself out there. Being rejected is an extremely important part of the creative process. Not only because it's important to get yourself out there to get hired, but also having your ideas be rejected is also good. Because you know what? Just the first idea, it should never be accepted. You should get rejected, so it allows you to think about a new concept, a new way, a better way, so you can craft the best possible solution. Whether it's creative and photographic, or whether it's a solution that you might have that may overcome not getting the job, not getting booked. So I want you to start thinking about rejection differently. Because rejection really is your friend. It is a wonderful thing. We just need to reshape the way we see it, the way we perceive it. We need to start seeing it as a wonderful opportunity for us to grow. And I'll tell you a little funny story that I've had. When I was first starting out, and I was, I went to university for a degree in photography, and then I pursued an MFA to be a professor of photography, and then I moved to LA, and I was just, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, wanting to be a top fashion photographer. And when I was around 23 years old, I was like, all right, I looked at all the top photographers in the world that were getting published in Vogue and Vanity Fair and shooting the big campaigns, and I noticed something. I noticed that kind of all across the board, the top photographers in the world, I'm talking the top 100 photographers in the world, they're all represented by agents. They're all represented by photography agents. So it's like, okay, you know what? If I want to be a top photographer, I should be represented by an agent too. Now, of course, a 23-year-old, punk kid from the rural Midwest, I wasn't necessarily the best candidate to be represented without any major clients and without tons of bookings and things like that. But you know what? I was persistent. And what I started to do was, I want to be represented by a top agent, not just any agent, but I want to be represented in New York. So what I did was started contacting all the agents in the United States that represent photographers. Now, this is tough. Just to give you an idea, if you're a represented photographer, you are one of the few in the world. Only about 1/100,000th of 1% of photographers are represented by agents. So this is a very small number. I would say that there's only about 100 agents in the world that even represent photographers, and each one represents anywhere from 3 to 8 photographers. So you're not talking about a whole lot of people. But this was a goal of mine. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to call all these agents. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to build value. And you know what? After I called 100 agents, some of them hung up the phone. Some of them didn't want to talk to me. Some of them did. And out of 100 agents, I got to talk to probably about 40 of them. And out of 40, I actually had an agent in New York who was like, you know what? Your work is amazing. I love your work. Send me your book. And you know what? I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I can't believe that. I called all these agents. I got tons of rejection, but I did get this one opportunity from a top agent in New York who was working at one of the biggest agencies. And I was like, oh my gosh, as a 23-year-old kid, how life transforming would this be if I was represented by him. I had stars in my eyes. Oh, maybe I'll, be a top photographer for Vogue and stuff if I can get represented by this agent. So I was like, okay, let's put together a portfolio. I scrambled and put together this photographic portfolio, and I didn't really have one that was ready to go. So I went out to an art store and I bought a black leather portfolio. It was about 11 by 17, and it was a spiral bound portfolio. And then I printed off my prints and did like hole punches through the edges of the prints and bound them into the portfolio, and I mailed it off to New York. And I didn't hear anything. I emailed, I called, no answer, never got a response. But you know what? I kept contacting them. And then finally, after a couple of weeks, I got a hold of this agent. And he was like, you know what? He remembered me, and I was like, hey, you remember the portfolio? You love my work on my website, and I sent you this book. And he said, this is absolute garbage. Why did you send this crap to me? This is a horrible presentation. I could never sell this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? These are the same images that you just saw on my website, and you were raving about them. You loved my work. It's the same pictures. What's the problem? And he said, Kevin, I could never sell this. It's not a screw post bound portfolio. It's a terrible presentation. You just have like prints printed on regular paper and then just, hole punched and bound into the book. It looks terrible. It's not a professional 3 screw post bound, portfolio made by a bookbinder, 11 by 14, 40 images with, either plastic sleeves or beautifully printed pages, double-sided. It's just this low quality crap that it looks like you got at an art store. And I was like, kind of shocked to hear this, but I was like, you know what? Okay, no problem. Why don't you mail it back to me? Because I spent several $100s on this thing. And you know what? He did. He literally mailed it back to me. I opened it up. He had broken my portfolio in half, shoved it in a box, and mailed it across the country from New York to LA. And I opened it up and I just started laughing. I'm like, okay, all right, he's sending me a message. But you know what? That certain act was one of the most generous things that anyone could ever do with rejection. Because for some people, it might crush their soul. But for me, it gave me a learning experience. I was like, even though I wasn't going to have an opportunity to be represented by this agent, you know what? I was so happy because it pushed me to go further. It pushed me to go back and try again. It even pushed me to create world-class portfolios. I hired a bookbinder and I made these beautiful 11 by 14 blue suede portfolios with slip covers, and it was all with like beautiful watercolor paper with photographic light jet prints printed and then adhesed to it, double-sided, looked absolutely spectacular. And I started building a whole series of these portfolios and then marketing them to agents. And then I got represented because I had the right presentation. I ended up getting represented by a different agency in New York. And you know what was funny is years later, this was like literally about 16 years later, I met up with this agent and had him speak as a panelist at one of my elite photographic workshops in New York. And you know what he told me? He told me that he really regretted not taking me on as one of his photographers, because he's looking at the photographers he's currently representing, and then he's looking at the unbelievable opportunities I've had in my career. And I've had the opportunity to shoot for these amazing top brands and publish all over the world and, make enormous amounts of money as a photographer, to the point where I actually bought a 49-room 13th century palace in France. And I've been able to have dream opportunities in filming as a TV director and photographing for campaigns for Burberry and doing these amazing opportunities. And he feels like he missed the boat. And you know what? That was an awesome experience of rejection that I'll never forget. If you guys have a story of rejection, something that happened to you, something that was a horrible experience that crushed your dreams, made you cry, crushed your soul, or maybe it was an uplifting experience like mine was, where it gave you an opportunity to grow and to achieve something more, I want you to leave a comment and let me know what that is, and I will respond and I'll give you some solutions on how to overcome that rejection. Because you know what? We are all in this together, and I want to help you. I really want to help you. I also encourage you to jump on and click on the link to get involved in our live photographic webinar that's directed solely on overcoming rejection. This is one of my favorite topics, and I can't wait to take your questions live and to have this amazing experience where we get in depth about how to overcome a rejection and how to create more and to go beyond that rejection to create success. Because I want you to use rejection to fuel the success of your photographic career. Click on the link, and I can't wait to see you.